Hi, I'm Josh Clark, WSA's Restoration Coordinator, bringing you a series on how to conduct a Residential Site Assessment, or RSA. Whether you are part of the RSA Steward Action Group or you just want to help a neighbor solve a stormwater problem, this video series will give you some insights on how to make the most of these engagement opportunities. Using the RSA process, you can help a neighbor identify ways they can slow down and sink in stormwater runoff and reduce pollution sources like pet waste and lawn chemicals. WSA's RSA process contains 3 parts: the desk assessment, the resident interview and site assessment, and the follow-up with the resident. This video will focus on the resident interview and site assessment, but first a few quick reminders about what to do before you visit the site. First, the GIS mapping application will help you get to know the site before you visit in person. Make note of the slope, soil type, distance from the waterway, and storm drains. It is helpful to print out a map of the property with space to make notes and a blank RSA form. For the site we will see today, we have already completed the desk assessment using GIS. We discovered that this property is likely to have some significant slopes with water draining towards the resident's home. We also have found that the soil profile is predominantly type B with moderate to high infiltration rates. We can also see from the satellite image that the resident's home is under heavy canopy coverage, at least in the back and side yards. We also have noticed that the site is very close to a stream. Prior to the visit, it is also a good idea to take time to communicate with the resident so that they know what to expect. You will find a sample email in the RSA resource folder on the Steward Only page. After you've done the preliminary work, it's time to conduct the RSA. For the assessment itself, it is helpful to bring along a clipboard, pencil, RSA forms and map of the property, camera or cell phone, and your Steward business cards. You can also bring along an RSA packet containing information about WSA rainscaping and pollution sources. There are 3 parts to a successful resident interview and site assessment: the interview, observations, and recommendations. We will now go through each part. When you arrive on site, introduce yourself as a master watershed steward and give the resident an idea of what to expect from the site visit. This will reinforce the email or letter you sent ahead of your visit. Ask the resident to share their concerns as you walk around the property. Take detailed notes and ask the resident for permission before taking photographs. As you listen to the resident describe their observations, it is important to remember they are the expert on their site. Understanding not only what is happening on the site, but how a resident is using it is very important. How do they use their property? Do they have kids or pets? Does the resident like to garden? Does the resident want a well-maintained lawn? All of these questions let you get to know the resident better and make tailored recommendations. Here we are off of Harwell Avenue in Crofton. The homeowner, Jennifer, asked us to visit her home today as she is concerned about stormwater coming from her neighbor's yard that is washing out a pathway between their homes. Her home's shady conditions also make it difficult for plants to grow. Finally, she is simply seeking advice for what to do in her front yard to be more environmentally friendly. Now that you've gathered the information from your interview, complete the RSA form. Be sure to take plenty of notes and mark important areas on your map so you can prepare your RSA resident follow-up letter. On your map of the property, note some of your observations. Water is key to our assessments. Ask yourself some questions like, where is it coming from? Is it coming from downspouts or hard surfaces? From neighboring properties? From roads? What does water do while it's on site? Is there flooding or erosion? Are there wet spots? Do you notice a high water table? Where does the water go when it leaves the property? The soil on site is also a very important part of identifying both problem areas and possible solutions. For a residential site assessment, you will not do an in-depth soil analysis, but it's a good idea to make note of any soil-related observations. Can you tell if the soil type is the same as the type noted on the GIS mapping application? Often, when homes are built, fill dirt that contains more clay is used around the home site. This can lead to greater runoff. Is the soil compacted? Look for pathways or thin patchy grass. Next, note the sun conditions. Knowing the sun conditions will help you identify plants that might be a good fit for the property. The conditions can vary in different parts of the property, so be sure to note that on your map. Next, note the vegetation on site. What is the condition of the grass? If it is bright green and lacking weeds, it is possible that the resident is using too much fertilizer, pesticide, or water. Is the grass patchy? Do you see bare spots? If so, there might also be problems with the turf's health. Are there canopy trees? If so, you may want to observe or ask what the resident does with their leaves. Do you notice invasive plants on site? Last, note the condition of landscape beds. If the existing landscaped areas are well maintained, the resident may be a good fit for additional landscaped areas. If landscaped areas are not well maintained or non-existent, you may think twice before suggesting a conservation landscape. Slopes show how water can move through the landscape. Make note of any steep slopes or flat areas. Make note of where each of the downspouts outputs on your map. Do downspouts flow to hard surfaces, grass, mulched beds, or into rain barrels? Do any disappear into the ground? If so, can you tell or does the resident know where they go? Sometimes downspouts go into a dry well or are connected to a pipe that flows into a wooded area or even onto the street. As you observe the site conditions, you will also notice hot spots and evidence of pollution sources. Hot spots can be areas where there is flooding or standing water, bare dirt, or invasive plants. Pollution sources could be pet waste, trash, lawn chemicals, leaf litter, oil, or septic pollution. Take time to make notes about any hotspots or pollution sources you see and note them on your map. For this property, we notice water flowing downhill from the neighbor's yard and pooling next to the house. This has led to bare soil and erosion in the shady area on the right-hand side of the house. The downspout on this side flows directly into the bare soil, making the issue worse. We also notice that there is evidence that dogs visit the site. There's a tree covered with English ivy. The tree canopy near the sidewalk and road may lead to leaves in the nearby storm drain. Your observations will lead you to make recommendations for your resident follow-up letter. Before you leave, take a moment to jot down some initial notes about what rainscaping practices might help the homeowner slow down, spread out, and soak in their stormwater. In this situation, on the right-hand side of the yard, a rain barrel coupled with a conservation landscape consisting of shade-tolerant plants might be best to contend with the bare soil and erosion issues. Mapping out their locations will be helpful when you get home and prepare your follow-up letter. Pet waste and leaf litter all present opportunities for the resident to adopt habits that help reduce pollution. Taking note of these conditions will remind you to include resources with your letter. After you've completed the RSA form, be sure to thank the resident for their time and give them a timeline as to when they will receive their follow-up letter.